In this video, I'm going through the benefits received by the homeowner or the seller. In a rent-own, the seller is technically called the optionor, but throughout this video and subsequent videos, I'll refer to them as either the seller or the homeowner. Now, in most instances, homeowners feel like they only have two options when it comes to getting out of their home. Option one is selling, option two is renting. But what they fail to realize is that they have a tremendous opportunity that is full of benefits if they were to lease their home out for 2 to 3 years and then sell it to the party residing in the home. Here are just some of the benefits a homeowner can receive by turning their home into a rent-own. The first situation is a slow market. In a buyer's market, meaning there are more sellers than buyers, the property could take forever to sell. The holding cost can be a financial drain on the seller, especially if he or she has bought another property. Now, the main solution to most people is to keep dropping the price of the home until someone ultimately buys the property. And when you add in the holding costs for each month, it didn't sell, plus the discount on the home from dropping the price, many homeowners can walk away losing all or a portion of their initial down payment. Now, the benefit by turning your home into a rent-own to the homeowner is opening up the possibility to a larger segment of the population, those who can't qualify today, which can decrease the time spent on the market and increase the price that they can get for the home. Now, another situation is relocation. It can also benefit the seller in situations where the seller is forced into a quick sale because of a job relocation, as an example. Now, a quick sale typically means losing a portion of your equity to get rid of the home quickly. If the homeowner is trying to sell in a slow market and forced to do a quick sale, they'll sacrifice a good amount of equity in order to get out of the property. Now, a benefit by turning the home into a rent-own, the homeowner can move on to their new location, sell the home in the future to the built-in buyer without having to take a shave on the price of the home. Typically, they'll sell the home for more than they would receive in today's market. Now, another benefit is they're going to make more money than they would if they were just renting it outright today. Now, when the option of turning the home into a rent-own is compared to a traditional renting than selling, the homeowner will always make more money with the rent-to-own. That's because it reduces or eliminates the following items: vacancies, utilities that come with vacancies, most repairs and maintenance expenses, selling commission or marketing expenses, and can generally increase their monthly income as well as the selling price. And when the homeowner considers those things, it becomes clear that the amount of money in the seller's pocket is often more with less work than if the seller continued to rent to a typical tenant. Now, another advantage or benefit is there's no bank prepayment penalties from selling early. Now, you can avoid huge payout penalties from the bank that the banks are implementing when you pay out your mortgage early. The banks are charging interest differential penalties that can easily be $15,000 to $30,000 or even $50,000, depending upon the remaining time on the mortgage, the interest rate of the mortgage, and the current interest rate. Now, it's a sad state of affairs that the banks make it almost impossible for homeowners to sell their home and walk away without giving them a good portion of their equity. Now, another benefit is the homeowner selling the home at a predetermined price. Now, the seller can set the price at the beginning of the term so he or she knows exactly how much they're going to be receiving at the end when the tenant buyer buys the home. Now, typically in a rent-own scenario, the seller can price the home at the top of the market range since they're offering financing to the tenant buyer and aiding them in purchasing the home. Generally, the future price of the home will be slightly higher than today's fair market value, except possibly if there's a market correction during the term of the rent-own. Now, it's almost impossible to predict this event. It is also important for the homeowner to know the end price, so when they're qualifying tenant buyers, they can determine if they qualify for the end purchase price today, so the homeowner can do their best to set the tenant buyer up for success. Now, another advantage is there's no real estate agent or fees or commissions to the homeowner. Now, since the seller is selling directly to the tenant buyer, there are no real estate fees or commissions to pay. This can be a huge savings to the seller. Another benefit is no ongoing maintenance. Since the tenant buyer is contractually responsible for most of the repairs, the seller's costs are greatly reduced. Now, in my program, for example, I set the limit at either $1,000 or $15,000 per instance. Now, what that means is every time that there's an issue in the home, if it's below the $1,000 threshold, it's the responsibility of the tenant buyer. If it's above the $1,000 threshold, then it's the responsibility of the owner. Typically, I set it at a limit that covers all of the appliances, and generally the only thing that's not covered in the limit that I set is typically the furnace, if the furnace were to go, or if there's an issue with the roof, which sometimes can be an insurance issue anyway. So those are typically the price points that the tenant buyer is responsible for, everything below $1,000 or $1,500 per instance. But as the homeowner, you're able to set your own price point. Now, another benefit to the seller or the homeowner is there's a reduction in the amount of management in looking after the property and the tenant buyer. Now, the tenant buyer is a homeowner in training and has a significant interest in the property. They generally act more like a homeowner than a tenant, and therefore your actual management of the property tends to be much less. Now, the seller makes money in 3 different places. The first place they make money is upfront. The tenant buyer, or the optionee, provides an initial option consideration at the beginning of the agreement. For my program, I usually accept either 2.5% of the purchase price or 5 times the monthly rent value. Now, this will be applied as a credit towards the purchase price when and only if the tenant buyer exercises their option before a predetermined date in the future. Now, in the meantime, since this initial option consideration is non-refundable amount, the seller, the optionor, can do with it whatever he or she wishes. Now, the second type place the homeowner will make money is periodic payments. Now, this is usually the difference between the total monthly expenses on the property, which usually includes the principal, the interest, the taxes, the insurance, any miscellaneous or accounting fees, and the combined total of the rent and option money being collected every single month. Now, the third place the homeowner makes money is the closing money. Now, 4 to 6 months prior to the option expiry date, the seller sends the tenant buyer an exercise of option notice to sign and return to the seller as an indication of their intent to exercise their option. One of 2 things will happen. First, the tenant buyer is not able to or chooses not to exercise their option and close on the deal. Now the seller can have the tenant sign an intent to vacate notice by the end of the term and find a new tenant buyer, which can be very profitable, or simply sell the property. Now, if the seller sells the property, they'll make the difference between the sale price today, less their original deposit, and the remaining balance of the mortgage, plus the upfront money and the periodic payments money. Second thing that'll happen is the tenant buyer exercises their option and proceeds with the purchase of the property. Again, the seller will make the difference between the pre-agreed sale price to the tenant buyer, less their original deposit, and the remaining balance of the mortgage, plus the upfront money and the periodic payments money. Hopefully, the seller bought it at below market value in the beginning, which usually means that their profit at closing will be greater. Now, another benefit that the homeowner or the seller receives by turning their home into a rent-own is the mortgage paydown. Now, each and every month during the term of the rent-own, the principal and the interest are being paid down on the mortgage. The longer the term, the more the principal of the mortgage gets paid down, leaving the homeowner with a greater amount of equity at the time of the sale. The spread between the purchase price and the mortgage payout gets wider and wider as each month passes. This is the true benefit to real estate for any homeowner, having someone else pay down the mortgage so they can get the money tax-free when they sell their home. And another benefit is no late payments. Typically, late payments are practically non-existent in lease options. Generally, the option agreement states that if the rent or option payment, yes, there are 2 separate monthly payments, is received late or not at all, then the monthly option consideration credit for that month is forfeited. Additionally, if the tenant buyer does not pay in a timely manner, they could be in danger of having the option become null and void. This would result in the tenant buyer losing any initial and monthly option consideration, as well as being evicted as permitted by the Provincial or State Residential Tenancies Act. Now, another benefit to the homeowner is no vacancies. Now, since the tenant buyer has a vested interest in the property, the chance of a vacancy is almost nil. The tenant buyer moved into the property with the full intention of making the property their own home. They have also given a substantial initial option consideration that will be applied to the down payment but is forfeited if they default on either the terms of the lease or the option contract. Vacating the premises would be considered a default. And those are the major benefits to the seller or the homeowner who turns their home into a rent-own. As you can see, there are a great deal of benefits to any seller or homeowner who chooses to take this path. Now, in most cases, a homeowner or seller can do it all themselves, making the majority of the money, or they can use a specialist to help with parts or the entire rent-own of their home. Now, regardless of what the homeowner decides, they'll make a lot more money turning their home into a rent-own than they would by choosing any other option available to them today. So those are the benefits to a homeowner or a seller for turning their home into a rent-own.